The smell of chocolate cake still wafted through the kitchen when I received the connection that would change everything. It was my father, Robert, speaking in an oddly cheerful voice. "Grace, how about we organize a surprise for your grandmother's 85th birthday?" 3 weeks later, when I saw Grandma Esperanza sitting in that armchair like a porcelain doll, her eyes glazed over and her hands trembling, I knew something was terribly wrong. What we discovered on that Tennessee farm wasn't just a party. It was the cruelest blow a family can inflict on its own matriarch. You won't believe how we discovered my own father was drugging my grandmother to steal her $2 million in property, and the twist that unfolded when the truth came out will restore your faith in divine justice in ways you never imagined. If you also have a grandmother who is the family treasure, subscribe to the channel to discover how God transforms the worst betrayals into the greatest blessings. Press the bell because this story of faith, courage, and miracles has never been told before. And the ending will prove that the Lord always has a plan greater than we can see. Prepare your hearts, because together we'll discover how a 28-year-old granddaughter saved her grandmother from the most elaborate scam ever plotted within a Christian family. It was a warm Tuesday in October when the phone rang in my kitchen. I was making oatmeal cookies, the recipe Grandma Hope taught me when I was just 10, when I saw my father's name flashing on the screen. Robert Matthews rarely called, especially on weekdays. "Hi, Dad," I answered, wiping my hands on the embroidered apron my grandmother had given me at my wedding. "Grace, my darling daughter." His voice was different, too excited, like a salesman trying to push expired product. "How is my favorite granddaughter?" I was already on alert. Dad never used that saccharine tone with me. For the 28 years of my life, he was always straight to the point, pragmatic as a businessman should be. "I'm fine, Dad. What about you? How are things in town?" He's worked as a real estate agent in Nashville for 15 years, 2 hours from our hometown of Millbrook. Since moving there, our conversations have revolved around Christmas and birthday greetings. "Everything's great here, but look, I called because I had a wonderful idea." He paused, as if rehearsing his words. "How about we organize a surprise party for your grandmother's 85th birthday? It's next Saturday. Have you ever received a call that seemed too good to be true? That feeling that something was hidden between the lines? A surprise party? Have you ever received a call that seemed too good to be true? That feeling that something was hidden between the lines? A surprise party?" I repeated, sitting down in the kitchen chair. "What kind of party?" "Oh, you know, something beautiful. Your Aunt Margaret is helping me organize it. We're going to do it right on the farm, with decorations, cake, special guests. It will be quite a celebration for our matriarch, Margaret, my father's younger sister, who was always jealous of how close Grandma Esperanza and I were. She lived in Atlanta and visited the family only when she needed to borrow money. And does Grandma know anything? Of course not. That's why we call it a surprise." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "She'll be thrilled, especially when she sees you there." This touched me. It had been almost 6 months since I'd seen Grandma Esperanza in person. Ever since she had that minor stroke earlier this year, Dad and Aunt Margaret had taken over her care, saying I was too young and inexperienced to understand the needs of an elderly woman. "Of course I will," he said, feeling a pang of longing. "Can you give me the address?" "What do you mean, address? It's at your grandmother's farm, where you always went." "But I thought you had moved her to a smaller, more practical place for her care. There was a long pause. No, she's still on the farm. Why would you think that? Because the last few times I tried to visit her, Aunt Margaret said she was resting or not well enough to receive visitors. Oh, you know how it is. Grandma has her good days and her bad days. But Saturday will be a special day, I'm sure. When I hung up, my husband David was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching my expression. He's been a police officer for 10 years and has that sixth sense for detecting when something doesn't add up. Your father inviting you to a family party? He asked, raising an eyebrow. In how many years of marriage, how many times has he done that? Never, I admitted, and a surprise, no less. He always said surprises were sentimental nonsense. David came closer and kissed my forehead. Maybe he's trying to reconnect with his family. People change, Grace. Maybe, I murmured, but something deep in my heart whispered that there was more to the story. That night, I tried calling Grandma Esperanza directly. The farm's landline rang several times before a voice answered, but it wasn't hers. Hello? It was Aunt Margaret. Hi, Auntie, it's Grace. Can I talk to Grandma? Oh, Grace, what a coincidence. I was just thinking about you. Her voice was strange, artificial too. Your grandmother is sleeping now, you know. She goes to bed early these days. I looked at the clock. It was only 6 in the evening. Grandma Hope had always been a night owl, never sleeping before 10. Can I leave a message for her to call me tomorrow? Sure. But look, since you called, let me tell you about the little party your dad is throwing. Little party. The word came out of her mouth, as if it were something small, insignificant. Very different from the big celebration Dad had described. Have you ever had the feeling that people are telling the same lie, but each in a different way? After that conversation, I stayed up all night, replaying every detail of my past failed visits to the farm. Someone always made up an excuse for me not to see Grandma alone. She was always resting, taking medicine, not in the mood to talk. And now, suddenly, a surprise party. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I drove to Millbrook without telling anyone. The road to Millbrook wound between hills covered in autumn gold oaks, each curve revealing landscapes that transported me back to my childhood. I used to drive this route with my eyes closed, counting the fences, the barns, the markers that divided one property from another. But when I arrived at the gate of Grandma Esperanza's farm, I hardly recognized the place. The estate had always been imposing. 200 acres of fertile land, a 2-story main house built in 1890, dark red barns, and the famous rose garden Grandma tended as if they were her own. But now, what I saw left me speechless. The iron gate, which had always stood open as an invitation to anyone who wanted to visit, was locked with a new padlock. A discreet sign read "Private property, visitors by appointment only." Visitors by appointment? On the farm that has always been a home, with its doors open to anyone in the community? I parked outside and walked to the fence. The house looked different. The 2nd-story windows had curtains drawn, something Grandma would never do during the day, because, she said, a closed house invites sadness in. The rose garden, which had always been Grandma Esperanza's pride and joy, was abandoned. Dry branches, wilted flowers, and weeds growing between the flower beds that once looked like something out of a magazine. Have you ever felt like you're looking back at your childhood home, but it's become a strange place, like someone has erased the memories from the walls? I tried ringing the gate bell, but no one was there. I shouted a few times, but only the echo of my voice came back from the empty hills. It was then that I saw movement in the house. A shadow flitted past the kitchen window. Someone was there, but pretending not to be. I got back in the car with a heavy heart. On the way home, I called my cousin Sarah, Uncle James's daughter, who lived 6 miles from the farm. "Sarah, when was the last time you saw Grandma Hope?" "Oh, Grace, it's been about 2 months. I tried to visit her last month, but her father said she had a bad cold and couldn't see anyone." "And you believed it?" "Why wouldn't I believe it? He's her son, right? And your Aunt Margaret confirmed the same thing." I hung up, even more worried. I called other cousins, old neighbors, people who attended the Methodist church where Grandma had been a churchgoer for 60 years. The story was always the same. Grandma Esperanza was in poor health, needing special care, not very willing to receive visitors. But the strangest thing, no one had spoken to her directly for months. That night, I told David everything. He listened to me silently, wearing that detective look I knew so well. "Grace, have you ever considered the possibility that she might actually be sick? Sometimes family protects you anyway. But why wouldn't they tell me the truth? I'm her closest granddaughter." "Maybe that's exactly why, so you don't have to worry." I wanted to believe the simple explanation, but something in my heart, that still voice Grandma always said was the Holy Spirit whispering, insisted there was something more. "David, promise me something?" "Of course. On Saturday, at the party, keep an eye on everything. Use your police instincts. If something is wrong, you'll notice it before I do." He took my hand. "I'll be fine. But Grace, be prepared for the possibility that your grandmother might be really fragile. 85 years after a stroke, people change." On Friday, the day before the party, I tried calling the farm again. This time, Dad answered. "Grace, I'm so glad you called. Everything is ready for tomorrow. It's going to be beautiful." "Dad, can I ask you a question?" "Of course. How is grandmother's health, really?" There was a pause. "Why do you ask that?" "Because for months, no one has been able to speak to her directly. Everyone says she's not well enough to receive visitors." "Oh, you know how it is. She has her ups and downs. Some days she's more energetic, others not so much. But tomorrow will be a special day." "Does she know I'll be there?" "It will be a surprise for everyone, my daughter. It will be a surprise for everyone." The way he repeated that phrase gave me chills. Have you ever had the feeling that someone was hiding something, but you couldn't figure out what? Saturday dawned with clear skies and crisp air, the kind of day that makes you believe God is smiling from above. David and I left home early, me wearing my favorite blue dress, the same one Grandma Hope had complimented the last time we saw each other, and carrying a bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums I'd bought at the Millbrook florist. During the drive, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that maybe Dad really was making an effort to bring the family together, that Grandma would be okay and happy to see me. But when we arrived at the farm, my intuition was confirmed. Something was deeply wrong. The gate was open, but 2 men in suits stood at the entrance, like security guards. As we approached, one of them stepped forward. "Names, please?" "I'm Grace Matthews, granddaughter of the birthday girl," I replied, finding the protocol strange. He consulted a list on his clipboard. "You can come in, park right there next to the barn." Davy glanced at me sideways. Security at an indoor family party? The property was unrecognizable. Yellow and white balloons hung on every lamppost, tables covered in lace tablecloths, and soft gospel music played in the background. Everything was so beautiful, so organized, so beautiful. And there were people, lots of people. Some I recognized, distant cousins, old neighbors, church friends, but others were complete strangers. Well-dressed men and women carrying briefcases, chatting in tight groups as if in a business meeting. Dad greeted us on the porch with a smile that was too wide. "There you are, Grace, my dear." He hugged me with an intensity I hadn't felt in years, but the embrace was mechanical, as if he were being watched. "And David, my favorite son-in-law. Where's Grandma?" I asked, looking around. "Oh, she's inside, in the main room. She came to get all dressed up for today." Dad paused. "But let me warn you, she's been a little slower lately. You'll notice the difference." Aunt Margaret stormed in, wearing an expensive dress and carrying a clipboard like she was the planner of a corporate event. "Grace, I'm so glad to see you." She gave me an air kiss, the kind that doesn't touch your face. "Your grandmother will be overjoyed when she sees you." "Can I see her now?" Sure, but first, let me introduce you to some family friends who came especially for today." She dragged me to a group of elegant people who were chatting near the cake table. There was something about their posture that bothered me, the way they looked around as if assessing, calculating. "Grace, this is the Petersons," Margaret said, indicating a middle-aged couple. "They're consultants. They help families plan for the future." "Consultants? At a birthday party?" The man extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Grace. Your aunt spoke so highly of you. It's so nice to meet the whole family." "My pleasure," I replied, but something about the way he said the whole family made me uncomfortable. David came over and whispered in my ear, "I'm going to take a walk around the property. I want to see what else is around here." I agreed and finally managed to enter the house. The main room was decorated with yellow flowers, Grandma's favorites, but the room had an eerie air, like a stage set for a play. The furniture was in different positions. The family photographs had been moved, and even the piano Grandma played on Sundays was covered with a lace tablecloth, as if it were no longer used. And there, in the center of the room, in an armchair I had never seen before, was Grandma Esperanza. My heart broke when I saw her. A strong woman who taught me to ride a bike, who braved storms by praying out loud, who at 82 still drove the farm tractor. This woman seemed to have shrunk to half her size. She was thin, pale, with eyes that seemed to see right through you. "Grandma?" I murmured, kneeling beside the chair. She turned her face slowly and looked at me with a confused, distant expression. "Grace? You came to see me?" I took her hand and almost cried. It was cold, fragile, and trembling slightly. Her voice, which had always been strong and steady, now came out as a whisper. "Of course I came, Grandma. It's your birthday." "Birthday," she repeated, as if trying to remember. "How old am I again?" 85, Grandma. 85 years of blessings." She smiled, but it was a lifeless smile. 85. Wow. Where did the time go? Have you ever felt like you were losing someone you love, even though they were still right there in front of you? "Grandma, how are you feeling?" "Tired," she sighed. "Always tired. They give me some medicine that makes me sleep a lot." "What medicines?" Before she could answer, Aunt Margaret appeared beside us. "Grace, I'm so glad you found your grandmother. Mom, look who's here to see you." Grandma Hope looked at Margaret with an expression I had never seen before, something between fear and resignation. "Hi, daughter," he said softly. "How is she?" I asked Aunt Margaret. "Oh, you know how it is. Some days are better. Some are harder." The doctor said it's normal after a stroke. She's more sleepy, more forgetful. But I knew Grandma Esperanza. Even after her stroke, which had been mild, she remained lucid, alert, with that elephant-like memory for dates and names. The woman in front of me seemed sedated. David returned from exploring the property and came straight to me. His face was tense. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. Now. I kissed Grandma Esperanza's forehead. "I'll be right back, Grandma. I'm not leaving without talking to you again." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "You're not leaving, are you, Grace? Please don't leave." Those words cut me like a knife. David pulled me to a secluded corner of the garden, away from the guests and decorations. His face wore that expression I knew well, the same one he had when he uncovered an important clue in an investigation. "Grace, your family is lying about everything." "Like this?" "I just walked around the property. There are some very strange things here." He looked around to make sure no one was listening. "First, I found new electrical cables running under the house's porch. These aren't normal power cables. They're thin wires, the kind used for recording equipment." My blood ran cold. "Recording? Audio equipment, possibly video as well. Someone is monitoring the conversations taking place inside the house." "But why?" "That's the million-dollar question. But there's more." David took his phone out of his pocket and showed me some photos he had discreetly taken. "See those men in suits milling around the party? They're not your average guests. They're all carrying identical briefcases and aren't socializing with anyone. They look more like lawyers or private investigators." I looked at the photos. Sure enough, there were at least 6 formally dressed men who weren't interacting with anyone else, just observing and writing things down on notepads. "And there's this," David continued, showing another photo. "I found it in the office on the 2nd floor of the house. The door was ajar. The image showed a table covered in papers, even from the distance. It was clear they were legal documents, contracts, official forms, pages with notary letter. Couldst thou see what they were?" I did not have time to get closer, but I saw enough. They're documents related to thy grandmother's estate. Transfers, real estate appraisals, and— He paused, as if he did not wish to say the next part. "And civil interdiction forms." Civil interdiction. It is a legal process where a person is declared mentally incapable of managing their own assets. When this happens, the family can take full control of the estate. The world began to spin around me. "Art thou saying that?" "I am saying thy family is trying to declare thy grandmother mentally incompetent, to take control of the farm and all her money." Tears burned my eyes. "But she is not incompetent. She is just strange." "Grace, was thy grandmother acting strange, or was she sedated?" The question hit me like a punch in the gut. "Dost thou think they're drugging her?" "I think we need to find out. Come with me." We went back inside. The party was still going on outside, but we had a mission. David led me to the downstairs bathroom. "Keep an eye on the door," he whispered. As I stood guard, he opened the medicine cabinet above the sink. After a few seconds, he emerged with a grim expression. "What did you find?" 3 bottles of medicine that shouldn't be here. Diazepam, haloperidol, quetiapine. "What medicines are these?" "Heavy tranquilizers, antipsychotics. Medications used in cases of severe mental disorders, schizophrenia, psychotic episodes." "But Grandma never had any of that." "Exactly. These medications, given to an elderly person without medical need, would cause exactly the symptoms you described: confusion, drowsiness, memory loss, apathetic behavior. I felt the ground drop beneath my feet. They're poisoning her. It appears so. And from the documents I've seen, the plan is to use this altered state to prove that she lacks the mental capacity to manage her assets. How much is Grandma's property worth? David did a quick calculation. 200 acres in Millbrook, in an area that's becoming very valuable because of rural tourism. Easily 2 million, maybe 3. What if she dies? Then the inheritance is divided among the children. But if she is declared incapable, whoever assumes guardianship can do whatever they want with the assets. I understood everything. That was why Dad and Aunt Margaret had grown so close to Grandma after her stroke. That was why no one could visit her anymore. That was why she seemed a shadow of herself. David, what do we do? First, we need to get your grandmother out of here. Then we'll go to the police. But how? They'll never let me. Yes, they will, because you're her granddaughter, and there's no legal document yet that prevents that. And I'm a police officer. If they try to stop us, they'll have much bigger problems. We returned to the living room where Grandma Esperanza was still sitting in the armchair, now surrounded by some of the elegant people we didn't know. A middle-aged woman was introducing herself. I'm Dr. Helena Ribeiro, a geriatrician. I've come to check on you. Grandma looked at her in confusion. Evaluate. It's just a conversation to see how your memory and reasoning are. Nothing major. That's when I realized what was happening right then. The party was actually a setup. The men in suits were witnesses. The doctor was there to officially certify that Grandma was mentally incapacitated. And we had arrived right in the middle of the coup. Have you ever felt like you've fallen into a trap that's been in the works for months? Dr. Ribeiro, I interjected. May I know who requested this evaluation? The woman seemed surprised by my intervention. The family members responsible for Mrs. Esperanza's care. It's standard procedure. And who are these responsible family members? Before she could answer, Dad appeared beside me. Grace, honey, you don't have to worry about that. It's just formalities. What kind of formalities? Aunt Margaret joined the group. Boring adult stuff, Grace. Paperwork to ensure Mom is well taken care of in the future. But I was no longer the naive 28-year-old granddaughter who had arrived 2 hours earlier. I was a woman who had just discovered that her family was trying to steal the matriarch of the house. Grandma, I said, kneeling in front of her again, do you want to talk to this doctor? She looked at me with the most lucid eyes I'd seen all day. I don't understand why I need to talk to her. I'm not sick. Do you feel sick? I feel tired, very tired, and confused sometimes. When do you feel confused? After I take the medicine they give me. The room fell silent instantly. Dr. Ribeiro frowned. Dad and Aunt Margaret glanced nervously at each other. What medicines are these, Grandma? Some big pills. They say they're for my blood pressure, but after I take them, I can't think straight. David approached and discreetly showed the doctor his police ID. Doctor, could you examine these medications being given to Mrs. Esperanza? As a police officer, I am concerned that there may be inappropriate medication being administered to an elderly woman. The whole situation changed instantly. Dr. Ribeiro, realizing something was wrong, agreed to examine the medications. Dad tried to protest. That's ridiculous. These are medications prescribed by the family doctor. Which doctor? Asked David. Dr. Mauricio Santos, who happens to be here today to explain the treatment. He was busy. Grandma, I interrupted. When was the last time you went to Dr. Santos? She thought for a moment. I don't remember seeing Dr. Santos recently. I haven't seen a doctor in months. Dr. Ribeiro rose from her chair. I'll need to examine these medications, and I'll need an explanation of who prescribed them and why. That's when everything fell apart. Aunt Margaret began to stammer. Look, doctor, maybe we were a little hasty. Maybe Mom doesn't need this evaluation today. Rush how? David asked, now in full cop mode. Well, we just wanted to make sure she was being taken care of. Cared for by whom? She always lived alone and was always independent. Dad tried to take control of the situation. David, you're overreacting. It's just a precaution. A precaution involving giving psychiatric medication to an elderly woman without a proper medical prescription. Dr. Ribeiro stood up abruptly. Gentlemen, if there is any suspicion of inappropriate medication, I must stop this evaluation. This could be considered elder abuse. It was at that very moment that Grandma Esperanza did something no one expected. She rose from her chair with difficulty, but with a determination I hadn't seen in months. Enough, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. Enough of this talk about me as if I were furniture. Everyone turned to her, surprised. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I don't see what you're doing? His hands were shaking, but his eyes shone with a lucidity that cut through the air like a blade. For months, you've been giving me medicine that makes me sleepy, that makes my head go haywire. You say it's for my own good, but I know better. Aunt Margaret tried to get closer. Mom, you're getting agitated. Don't touch me. Grandma screamed, and the sound echoed throughout the house. You're not my daughter anymore. A daughter doesn't poison her own mother. The silence that followed was deafening. The nearby guests stopped their conversations. The men in suits glanced at each other nervously. Grandma Hope turned to me, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. Grace, my beloved granddaughter, they want to steal me. They want my farm, my money, everything your grandfather and I worked so hard to build. She held my hands with surprising strength. For weeks they've been making me sign papers, saying it's to get things organized. But when I ask what I'm signing, they give me more medicine and tell me not to worry. Dad was red with anger. Mom, stop this act. You're embarrassing everyone. Theater. Grandma turned on him with a fury I hadn't seen since my childhood, when she fought with dishonest salesmen who tried to cheat farmers. Robert Matthews, I gave birth to you, raised you, taught you the ways of the Lord. I work from dawn to dusk to give you and your brothers a good life. And now you want to treat me like a sick animal. Her voice rose, filled with righteous indignation. You think because I'm 85, I'm an idiot. You think I don't notice when you whisper in corners, when you make phone calls that stop when I walk in the room. She pointed at the men in suits. Do you think I don't see these strangers in my house, scrutinizing my things, as if they already own them? Dr. Ribeiro was shocked. Miss Esperanza, are you saying you've been medicated against your will? I'm telling you my own children are poisoning me to steal from me, Grandma said, and the strength in her voice caused some of the guests to start murmuring among themselves. David approached Grandma with the respect she deserved. Donna Esperanza, do you want to leave this house now? I do, she said without hesitation. I want to get out of here and never come back as long as those thieves are around. Mother, you can't go out, Aunt Margaret said desperately. You need to be taken care of. The only precautions I need to take is to stay away from you. Dad tried to block our way to the door. She can't leave. I have legal responsibility for her. What legal liability? David asked, showing his identification. "Show me the documents that prove it." "They are being processed, so until they are approved by a judge, Mrs. Esperanza has full right to decide where she wants to be." At that moment, something miraculous happened. Grandma Hope walked over to the piano covered by the towel and with a firm gesture pulled back the fabric. "This piano," she said, tapping the keys with fingers that no longer trembled, "was a gift from my husband Thomas for our 10th wedding anniversary. Every Sunday morning for 60 years, I have played hymns on this piano to praise the Lord." She began to play "How Great Thou Art," and her voice, which minutes before had seemed weak and confused, came out clear and strong. "Lord my God, when I, in wonder, contemplate the work of your..." Some of the older guests, who actually knew Grandma Esperanza, began to sing along. And in that moment, the sedated and confused woman completely disappeared. There stood the matriarch I'd always known, strong, determined, full of faith. When she finished playing, she turned to everyone in the room. "This is my home. This is my farm. And as long as God gives me breath and strength, no one will take me from here by force or steal me with lies." She looked directly at Dad and Aunt Margaret. "You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave my property. And take these strangers with you." "Mom, you can't kick us out," Dad protested. "Yes, I can. This property is in my name. It always has been. And it will continue to be in my name until the day I die." Dr. Ribeiro approached Grandma. "Mrs. Esperanza, I need to ask you some questions about your mental health for my report." Grandma smiled for the first time since we arrived. "Ask away, doctor, but I'll tell you right now. I was born on March 15th, 1938, here in Millbrook, Tennessee. I married Thomas Matthews in 1960, had 6 children, built this farm with my own hands, and I know exactly how much money I have in the bank. $342,000 in my checking account, plus $800,000 in savings." She paused and looked at Dad. "And I also know that in the last 3 months, $60,000 have been missing from my account, transferred without my authorization." Dad's face turned white. "Do you have any explanation for this, Robert? Have you ever witnessed the moment when an elaborate lie completely crumbles in the face of the truth?" The party had transformed into something else. The legitimate guests, cousins, neighbors, church friends, were shocked by the revelations. The men in suits began packing up their briefcases and discreetly heading for the exit. Aunt Margaret tried one last tactic. "Mom, you're confusing things. This money was used for your medical care, home improvements." "What improvements?" Grandma retorted. "My rose garden is dying. The back fence has been broken for months, and you changed the lock on my own bedroom." She turned to me. "Grace, do you want to see something interesting?" Grandma led me to the desk in the corner of the room and opened a locked drawer. "They didn't know I had a second key," she said with a mischievous smile that reminded me of my childhood grandmother. Inside the drawer were documents, lots of documents. Every time they gave me papers to sign, I kept a copy here. And every night when the medicine wore off, I read it all. She spread the papers out on the table. They were powers of attorney, property transfers, even a completed civil interdiction request. "Look here, Grace," she said, pointing to a signature. "This isn't my handwriting. They've forged my signature on at least 10 documents." David examined the papers with a professional eye. "Dona Esperanza, these documents are evidence of attempted fraud. With your permission, I will confiscate them for investigation. You can take everything, she said. And you can take them too, she pointed at Dad and Aunt Margaret. We're not going anywhere, Dad said, trying to sound authoritative. This is a family dispute. It has nothing to do with the police. Forgery of documents, administration of medication without proper medical prescription, and unauthorized bank transfers are all police business, David replied, already taking his phone out of his pocket. That's when the twist that no one expected happened. Grandma Hope walked to the center of the room and asked for everyone's attention. Before my children are arrested, she said, I want to tell you something you don't know. The silence was total. 3 months ago, when I realized Robert and Margaret were plotting against me, I sought out a lawyer in Nashville. Not just any lawyer, the best family law attorney in the entire state. She smiled with that sparkle in her eyes that meant she had a trump card up her sleeve. And I discovered something very interesting. By law, anyone who tries to defraud or harm an elderly person automatically loses any right to inheritance. Dad and Aunt Margaret were petrified. So, Grandma continued, I've changed my will. Robert and Margaret won't inherit a penny of what I've built. Everything, the farm, the money, the rental houses, will be divided equally among the other 4 children and you, Grace. Tears streamed down my face, not because of the property or the money, but because Grandma had found a way to protect herself and still teach a lesson about honesty and family. And there's more, she said with that mischievous smile. The money you stole from my account, it's already been reported to the bank as stolen. You'll have to pay back every penny with interest. Aunt Margaret began to cry. Mom, we just wanted to take care of you. That's a lie, Grandma said firmly. You wanted my money, but you forgot one thing. I learned to be smart long before you learned to be dishonest. She turned to all the guests. This party is over. Those who truly love me can stay for dinner. Those who came here with ulterior motives can leave. And then, to my utter surprise, Grandma Hope returned to the piano and began playing Amazing Grace. His voice filled the house. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. One by one, the people who truly loved her joined in the singing. Cousins, neighbors, church friends. The house was filled with music and true love. Papa and Aunt Margaret left in silence, carrying their things and their sizz. The men in suits disappeared like smoke. Dr. Ribeiro wrote in her report that Grandma Esperanza was perfectly lucid and capable of making her own decisions. And I discovered that my grandmother didn't need to be saved by me. She had saved herself. Have you ever noticed that we sometimes underestimate the strength of the people we love? That sometimes they are much smarter and braver than we imagine? 3 months later, Dad and Aunt Margaret were convicted of attempted elder fraud and ordered to return all the stolen money and pay compensation. Grandma Esperanza went back to tending her farm, driving her tractor, and playing the piano on Sundays. And I learned that true family is not those who share the same blood. It is he who shares the same heart. It's the one who loves you when you're strong, but doesn't try to weaken you when you're vulnerable. It's who protects you, not who tries to steal from you. Today, at 87, Grandma Esperanza is stronger than ever. Her farm has prospered, her faith remains unshakable, and she created a foundation to help other seniors who suffer from family abuse. God allowed this to happen, she told me one Sunday afternoon as we made cookies together, to show me who are the children of my heart and who are the children of only my blood. And what's the difference, Grandma? Children of the heart love you for who you are. Children of the blood sometimes only love you for what you have. She smiled and kissed me on the forehead. You, my dear Grace, have always been the daughter of my heart. And I understood that the greatest miracle was not discovering the betrayal. It was discovering that true love is stronger than any blow, smarter than any lie, and more lasting than any inheritance. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling us if you also have a warrior grandmother in your family. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that show how God uses our own strength to overcome life's battles. Have you ever underestimated the wisdom of someone you love? Have you ever discovered that sometimes the most fragile people are actually the strongest? Hit that notification bell, because in the next story, I'll tell you about the man who thought he was saving his wife from an accident, but discovered she was running away from a secret she'd been keeping for 20 years. What she was hiding will change your perspective on forgiveness forever. What secret did a wife keep for 2 decades? Why did she risk her life rather than tell the truth? And how did God use an accident to reveal a redemption no one expected? Come back here to find out. In the meantime, remember, never underestimate the strength of a person who hath faith. They may appear fragile on the outside, but they carry the strength of God within. Because every story is a thread, every memory an embroidery in time. Until next time, my dears, may God bless you as He blessed Grandma Esperanza with the wisdom to defeat your enemies by using their own intelligence against them.